Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be taking you through a week in my life as a baker. I do own my own decorating studio as well as a at-home bakery. So you're going to see a little bit of the prep work that I do for the studio and for my at-home cake shop. So this week I had a cookie class scheduled, so I'm just going to be prepping the cookies for that class. It is close to Valentine's Day, so we are doing a Valentine's themed cookie class. So when I'm working with sugar cookie dough, I like to work on a silicone mat. This makes picking up the cookie dough after it's been cut a lot smoother. I also like to prep my silicone mat with some flour. That way, again, it picks up a lot easier. If you've ever worked with sugar cookie dough, you'll realize that it likes to stick to your surface, so this just makes the process a lot smoother. A good sugar cookie recipe will require you to refrigerate your dough before you start baking it. So I did allow my dough to thaw out on my counter for about 20 minutes before I started to roll it out. Then I start to knead it just to make it a little bit more easier to work with. And when I'm rolling it out, not only do I like to flour the bottom, the surface, but I also like to flour the top of the cookie dough and then also my rolling pin. And this is just to keep anything from sticking. So once I've rolled my cookie dough to about 1/4 of an inch, that's when I start to cut. Also notice that when I'm rolling, I always start in the middle. This ensures that I get an even dough all throughout. So once my dough is all nice and rolled out, I grab a cookie cutter and I like to dip my cookie cutter in that little pile of flour that I have, and this just keeps your dough from sticking to the cookie cutter. So always check your cookies and make sure that it is 1/4 of an inch thick. Anything thinner than that will burn quickly in the oven, and cookies that are too thick bake unevenly. So you run the risk of having a soggy middle and burnt edges. One trick to keep your cookies from spreading is to place them on the cookie sheet, and then after you've placed them on the cookie sheet, you want to put them in the fridge for at least 10 minutes before you start to bake them. A nice chilled cookie is less likely to spread and more likely to hold its shape. This is a common mistake a lot of people run into when trying to bake sugar cookies. Also, another baking tip, you want to set your timer at least 2 minutes before the recommended baking time because everyone's oven works differently, so you don't want to run the risk of over baking your cookies or your cake. Always check on it before the recommended baking time. So after baking on this day, I did write back to a few emails, and that was the end of my working day. Then on the next day, I started to bake my cakes that I needed for that week. So here I'm just making my signature vanilla cake. By the way, I have an online baking class and I teach exactly how to make this cake and all the tips that you need to make a cake. I go as far as the importance of each ingredient, what I've learned throughout the years, troubleshooting, the buttercream, and just everything that you need to make this specific vanilla cake, as well as tips that you can definitely use for other cakes. I also teach you how to do some simple cake decorating and how to cut and store your cakes. If you're interested, you can check out all the details on my website, which I will be linking in the description. One tip that I do recommend to all my students when they're starting to bake cakes from scratch is to invest in a scale. This not only helps you reduce the amount of dishes that you have to wash, but also provides accurate measurements every single time. Notice how I'm slowly adding in my eggs and not all of them at once. This is because I want to make sure that they're well incorporated into the batter, because if you were to add all of them at once, there is a chance that they may not mix correctly and you're gonna have little streaks of egg in your cake, and that's gross. If your cakes are coming out too dense, whether you're making it from scratch or from the box, it could be because you are over mixing your batter, so you don't want to mix over 30 seconds. When you're first starting out, I recommend weighing out your batter, and that way it can be evenly distributed between each pan. I just kind of eyeball it just because I've been doing this for so long, but I would highly recommend you weighing out each individual pan to make sure that they are all nice and even. Then I like to lightly tap each pan to make sure that the batter is evenly distributed. And also, oven placement is super important. Now I have a convection oven, so I'm able to put more cakes in the oven. So if you do have a convection oven, this is how I like to place my cakes when I have more than 3 pans. I just make sure that the pans are not on top of each other. If you are using a gas oven, then I highly recommend that you only use the bottom rack and not the top. Next, I'm going to be making my favorite chocolate cake ever in the world, but unfortunately for my own personal cravings, this cake was for a customer and not for my own tummy. Next is another Valentine's Day prep. So we are selling some Will You Be My Valentine cookie boxes, and so one of the cookies that are in the boxes are Linzer cookies. So here I am just preparing the Linzer cookie dough. That way I can have it ready to go. So when I need it, I just roll it out and bake it. Now these Linzer cookies also require me to refrigerate the dough before I bake. So I need to refrigerate it for at least 4 hours. So what I like to do is I grab a piece of plastic wrap and I'll split the dough into 2 parts, wrap it up, and then just store it in the refrigerator. So cookie dough does usually last in the refrigerator for about 3 days. Anything longer than that, it does need to go in the freezer. And the cookie dough that I use lasts in the freezer for about 3 months. I wouldn't go any longer than that because then your cookie dough starts to get freezer burn. Next, I'm just preparing some buttercream for a buttercream piping tutorial. So I have these worksheets that I made and that I sell on Etsy. So I'm just gonna film a video on how to use that template. But first we need some buttercream. So I'm just making it and coloring it and separating it into different piping bags. One tip I recommend when coloring buttercream is to always use gel food coloring. I highly recommend avoiding any water-based food coloring because you should never add any water to your buttercream. So this includes the food coloring. I personally like to get my food coloring at a Hobby Lobby because it is affordable, and I like to go and just pick out the colors that I need instead of having to buy a whole set when I ran out of a color. And here I am recording my buttercream piping tutorial, and that was the end for that day. Then on the next day, it was time to decorate some cakes. So once again, we're making buttercream, and for this cake, it was a vanilla berry cake. This one is by far one of my most popular cake flavors, and this is the exact cake that I teach the cake baking class on. The customer did pick up on this day, so I woke up a little bit earlier to make sure that I had it ready for her because it was her birthday, and she was really excited to try this cake flavor. She wanted specifically this cake flavor, and I don't blame her because this is again one of our best flavors. How many times did I say flavors? Anyways, so I topped it off with some fresh berries, and now I moved on to the next thing on the list, which is to make royal icing for the cookie decorating class that I had this weekend. So this week was the start of our Valentine's Day classes. You might think it's a little too early, but it's never too early, okay? After Christmas, after New Year's, it's Valentine's Day season. So one of these batches were for a Galentine's party that we had scheduled, and then the next batch was for a community cookie decorating class, which was also Valentine's Day themed. So the next day was Friday, and Fridays is usually when I drop off all the supplies needed for our classes and get everything ready for the instructors. So I'm just dropping off all the cookies, all the frostings, and also set up the Galentine's juice bar. So here I'm just organizing the fridge and rotating everything. I'm getting the old bins out, the ones from last week's class, and putting in the new one. And then I started working on the juice bar. So the juice bar is basically just a bar with like orange juice and pink lemonade, and then sometimes we have some fruit there. And that's for the guests to enjoy while they're decorating their cookies. So they're welcome to bring champagne of their own. We do not provide the alcohol, but we do have the juice bar in like little glasses, and it's just super cute. So I'm just cleaning up the table and setting up the tablecloth, and then setting up everything else minus the actual juice in the pitchers and the fruit in the little plates. Then lastly, I finished off my work week with this final cake. It is a black and pink vintage heart cake for a good customer of mine. I can't tell you how many vintage heart cakes I've made, but I love making them every single time. Something about piping is just so relaxing, and I love when there's just so much detail on them. This specific cake wasn't too detailed. It did have a little bit of piping, but I ended up putting some glitter all over the cake and some writing on top, and then on the sides I did put bows, which you can't see me putting the bows, but I ended up putting them on the next day right before they picked up because I thought it made the cake look a lot cuter, but I just confirmed with the customer first and then I put them on there. But the next day was just pickups and grocery runs, and that was the end of my work week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed the video and can take the tips and apply them to your business or to your decorating journey. I hope you all have an amazing week, and we'll see you soon.